Welcome to this session on exceptions. We're going to talk about how exceptions are raised or thrown, either automatically or manually. We will also introduce how we can handle them gracefully with exception handler flows or using the global exception handler. Exceptions occur when an operation fails at runtime. When thrown at runtime, an exception will cause an immediate interruption in the flow. This means that the current logic flow is interrupted, and the execution moves to an exception handler. The execution continues in the exception handler flow and does not return to the original flow. Exceptions may be raised automatically by the platform, for instance, when a database constraint violation occurs when data in the database is manipulated. It also can be raised explicitly when defined in the flow for some reason. So what does it mean to move the execution to an exception handler flow? It means that whenever an exception is raised, the execution moves to the most specific exception handler. It will then proceed through that handler flow. So if a database exception occurs and a database exception handler flow exists, that is where the execution will move to. This is important when we have multiple exception handlers inside an action flow. An action can have multiple exception handler flows for database, security, communication, and custom user exceptions. Inside an action flow, it is not mandatory to have exception handlers. When a matching exception handler flow does not exist in the action flow where the exception is raised, the execution moves to an outer context. In other words, it bubbles up until a matching handler is found. This is why it is important to have a global exception handler defined. By default, one exists inside the common UI flow, but it can be modified to meet the application needs. The global exception handler is the most outer context, therefore it should be able to handle all exceptions.